So here we'll see introduction to nervous system. We'll see the important points from which your pharmacology is based. So particularly on the nervous system itself, there are two sections of pharmacology and medicinal chemistry which are based upon the nervous system. First section will be your drug acting on CNS, and the second section will be a drug acting on ANS. These two sections from your pharmacology part, it is based upon the nervous system. So you have to understand the basics of nervous system so that you can easily understand the drug acting on nervous system. First we will see the nervous system. Your nervous system is divided into two parts: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So it consists of your brain. So brain is nothing but the organ. Okay, it is an organ of nervous system, and it is the organ responsible for the coordination and reaction of yourself. So your body gets coordinated, or your body gets reacted by using this brain. So whatever the activities of body as like other system, like your skeletal system, like your muscular system, like your other system. So brain is the central organ for coordination. Remember. Now your nervous system consists of two parts: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So in the central nervous system, you have two parts again: brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord comes under the central nervous system. In case of peripheral nervous system, you have different nerves like your somatal nerve is there, then autonomic nerves are. In case of your central nervous system, you have two parts. First one is the brain, and second one is the spinal cord. So brain and spinal cord, they are nothing but they are the part of central nervous system. Now your brain is divided into two hemisphere. Hemisphere means half of circle. This is your brain. Okay. So brain is divided in a two hemisphere. Okay. हाफ ऑफ पार्ट का हेमिस्फीयर आपके इसमें होगा आपके skull में होगा, and this brain is located in the skull. Okay, located in the skull, and the spinal cord extend from the brain into the vertebral column through a foramen magnum. So the foramen magnum is nothing but the opening of skull. So here is the opening. Okay, it opens, okay, below the medulla oblongata from the foramen magnum. Foramen magnum नाम का एक ये ओपनिंग है. foramen magnum से ये spinal cord, the spinal cord will extend from brain into the vertebral column through the opening of foramen magnum. Okay. Now your brain has a two hemisphere. Remember, brain has a two hemisphere. So the largest part of brain is known as a cerebrum. This is the part known as a cerebrum. This is the largest part of your brain. That is known as a cerebrum. Largest part of your brain is known as a cerebrum. याद रखो. There is another part. It is known as a cerebellum, or it is known as a small brain. It is known as a large brain or big brain. It is known as a small brain. Cerebellum is known as a small brain. There are two nervous systems: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, which coordinates, which receive the external stimuli like other systems of your body, and the signal will be processed in the body, and the plan of action will be decided in the nervous system only, and it will be transferred to signal will be transferred to again another organ to react. Okay, so input, processing, and action. Okay, so input is nothing but the sensory. Most of the time it is the sensory input. Sensory. Okay, so whatever the external change in the temperature, external change in the pressure, or touch sensation, or any other, so that is nothing but the input. So that will be carried to a brain, and brain will process that signal, and it will decide the plan of action. So decision of plan of action is done in the brain, and the reaction is done by the various organs. Okay, so it will decide the plan, and it will transmit a signal to your particular organ. Okay, for example, if you want to run, so जैसे कुछ आपको threats नजर आता है, threat. Suppose that you have in front of you have a tiger in front of you. So you have a threat now. So you have to run. So once you see the tiger, the signals will be transmitted to brain. Okay, since then brain will process and prepare you for flight, prepare you for fight, for running. So it will transmit the signal to your circulatory system, then your skeletal system to run, to escape. So that is nothing but that is just an overview of your how the process occurs in the. Now these are the different part of brain. Largest part is known as cerebrum. Then this is known as small brain, cerebellum. Okay, and in that also you have different part like hypothalamus, thalamus, pons, then medulla oblongata, then Spinal cords, it extend from foramen magnum to the coccyx of the your spinal cord. Okay, so depending upon that, the regions are divided. Like cervical region, in that you will have cervical. This is cervical region. This is thoracic region. Okay, thoracic region. Then lumbar region. So here you will have thoracic nerves. Okay, here you will have splenic nerve, and these are sacral nerves, lumbar and sacral. So this is just an overview of your nervous system. This is a structural overview. We'll see the next. I have told you this nervous system is divided into two parts. First, we'll see the brain. So your brain is divided into three parts. Your brain is divided into three parts. First one is known as a prosencephalon. First one is known as a prosencephalon. First one is known as a prosencephalon. The second one is known as a mesencephalon. Second one is known as a mesencephalon. Third one is known as a rhombencephalon. Third one is known as a rhombencephalon. Or these are also known as a forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain respectively. So brain is divided into different parts, different anatomical structures. So first anatomical structure is nothing but the prosencephalon, which is also known as a forebrain. Second one is known as a mesencephalon, which is also known as a midbrain. And third anatomical structure in the brain known as a rhombencephalon. So that is also known as a hindbrain. This prosencephalon is further divided into two types. Prosencephalon is further divided into two types. First one is a telencephalon and second one is a diencephalon. First one is telencephalon and second one is a diencephalon. So in the telencephalon, these structures included cerebral hemisphere, then basal ganglia, then hippocampus and amygdaloid nucleus. Okay, so cerebral hemisphere means आपके जो ब्रेन है ब्रेन का जो hemisphere. So there are two parts. First hemisphere and second hemisphere. So it telencephalon includes cerebral hemisphere, then basal ganglia. Ganglia means connection of neurons. Then hippocampus and amyloid nucleus. These four parts are there in the telencephalon. Now diencephalon, it consists of a thalamus, hypothalamus, metathalamus, and subthalamus. That means hypothalamus that included into diencephalon. These are the part of hypothalamus only. Thalamus, hypothalamus, metathalamus. Right? Then in case of your rhombencephalon, they are further divided into two. First one is a metencephalon, and which includes pons and cerebellum, pons variola and cerebellum. Again, myelencephalon, so it includes medulla oblongata. So these are the parts of brain. So just remember the parts of brain. Sometimes they might ask you question to confuse you. Confuse करेंगे आपको question पूछ के कि बोलेंगे one of the following is not a part of diencephalon, one of the following is not a part of triencephalon. Okay, one of the following is not a part of telencephalon. So they will give you part. Remember, forebrain is known as a prosencephalon, midbrain is known as a mesencephalon, and hindbrain is known as a rhombencephalon. So prosencephalon is divided into two types: telencephalon and diencephalon. Telencephalon will includes cerebral hemisphere, basal ganglia, hippocampus, amyloid nucleus. Diencephalon will include different parts of your thalamus, hypothalamus, metathalamus, and subthalamus. Then your rhombencephalon, which is known as a hindbrain, it includes two parts: mesencephalon and myelencephalon. Anatomical structures, okay, depending on the metencephalon is divided, that is nothing but that includes pons, variola, and cerebellum, and myelencephalon includes medulla oblongata. Then again, this nervous system is divided into two types. First one is the central nervous system, okay, and second one is the peripheral nervous system. In the central nervous system, you will have brain and spinal cord. Okay, in the peripheral nervous system, you have two kind of nerves: somatic nerve and autonomic nerve. So depending on that, somatic nervous system is you can control it. Okay, it's in your will. So if you want to contract your leg, if you want to extend your leg, you can because it is under voluntary control. But in case of autonomic nervous system or autonomic nerve, they have some sort of autonomy, and you cannot control the autonomic nerves. So again, autonomic nervous system is divided into two types: sympathetic division and parasympathetic division, or you can call as a sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So remember over here thing, nervous system is divided into two types. First one is central one, second one is a peripheral one. Peripheral one. In the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. In the peripheral nervous system, you have autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system. So out of that autonomic nervous system, you cannot control. So you cannot stop your heartbeat. So though your heart is beating for someone, you cannot stop your heartbeat for himself. So it's not in your control. So autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system is you can control. Okay. For example, you can if you want to dance, you can dance whatever way you want. If you want to shake your head, you can shake. So it is supplied by somatic nerves. So it is known as a somatic nervous system. It is a control. It is under control of your voluntary. It is a voluntary control. Somatic nervous system. And this autonomic nervous system is not under your control. So involuntary. You cannot control the secretion of amount of insulin. You cannot control the secretion of amount of gastric acid in your stomach. You cannot control the पेरिस्टाल्टिक मोमेंट. ऐसा नहीं कि नहीं अभी मुझे 2-3 दिन बाहर जाना है तो मुझे टॉयलेट ही नहीं आना चाहिए 3 दिन तक. यू कैन नॉट कंट्रोल. सो दैट इज अ एटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टम. सो इट हैज सम सॉर्ट ऑफ एटोनॉमी. ये आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं रहेगा. सो एटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टम आर फर्दर डिवाइडेड इनटू टू टाइप. फर्स्ट वन इज सिंपैथेटिक division or sympathetic nervous system. Second one is a parasympathetic nervous system. We'll see these system individually. Now just try to understand these things. Next part is your again nervous system is divided into two type. Your nervous system is divided into two types: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. This one is known as central nervous system. This is known as central nervous system. So it includes brain and spinal cord. You can see over here. So and peripheral nervous system, which consists of a different nerves, different nerve. So either it may be either sensory nerve or it may be either motor nerve. Sensory nerve, okay, they are known as sensory division. Sensory nerve and motor nerve, both are the part of your peripheral nervous system. So sensory nerve will carry a signal from external environment. So it will carry signal from external environment towards the brain. Towards the brain signal जाएगा आपका sensory nerves. Now sensory nerves are also known as a afferent nerve or afferent nerve. So afferent means towards the brain. So they carry signal from your peripheral parts of your organs and external skin, etc. So they will carry signal towards the brain. They are known as an afferent nerve or sensory nerve. So sense, like for example, different senses. You have different senses. Sensory receptors are divided into different types. So for example, sensory receptors. So different type of senses like sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. So if anybody calls you by taking your name, you react with his voice. That is due to hearing. So if you got a bright light, that is because of the sight. If you got a very good smell of your you react. That is because of the smell. Okay. So senses like sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So these senses are carried towards the brain by sensory nerves. These senses are known as the external senses. This is known as the external senses. Now internal senses. So internal senses means sense your sense within the body. Within the body. आपके body में क्या change हो रहा है उसके लिए एक अलग से sensory system है. It is known as internal environment sense. For example, chemoreceptors are there, baroreceptors are there, and osmoreceptors are there. So chemoreceptors, if there is a change in the for example chemical nature of your body. So if you got a acidic, if you got a systemic acidosis, so your body will try to counteract that. Your body will try to correct that, utilizing more alkali. Okay. Then baroreceptors means pressure receptors. Okay, pressure receptors. So mostly blood pressure is controlled by baroreceptors. For example, your normal blood pressure is in a range of 120 120 by 80. That is normal blood pressure. Systemic 120 mm of Hg and diastolic is 80 mm of Hg. So that is normal. But if you got a increase in blood pressure, so आपका blood pressure increase होगा. So in case you have increased blood pressure, so baroreceptors, they are nothing but the specialized type cell which are located in the aorta of your heart. Okay. So if there is increase in blood pressure, these receptor will be stimulated and they will transmit message to brain. Brain will release some chemicals to decrease the blood pressure. Okay. Suppose that if your blood pressure is less than normal, so again chemoreceptor will be activated. They will send a signal to brain, and brain will do accordingly. Brain will again release the neurotransmitters to counteract the decreased blood pressure. Then again osmoreceptors. So osmoreceptors, they work on the osmotic property of blood. For example, if you got a if you decrease if your blood has a decreased osmotic pressure, so for example if you have blood loss, so osmoreceptors will be activated and they will signal to brain that blood is decreased. Brain will release some hormones or neurotransmitter to increase the blood, or to increase the water retention, okay, through kidney. So this is nothing but the internal environment signal sensory receptor. Sense out external environment sense like touch, hearing, smell, touch, then pain, etc. etc. So these sensory nerves will transmit the signal to the brain. Motor neuron or motor division, or they are known as a efferent nerve. Motor nerve or efferent neuron. Motor neuron or efferent neuron. So what will they do? They will transmit a signal from brain to the various organs. The brain from various organs. So ये जो signal है ये brain को दे दिया है अपने sensory receptor ने. Brain will process that signal, and this signal will be transmitted to efferent, is transmitted through efferent neuron to the particular organs or tissue for a particular action. For example, this efferent neuron or motor neuron. So it is transmitted to a different organs or system of your body. Effector organs. What are the different effector organs? So they may be either somatic or autonomic. For example, you can see over here, this is a muscle fiber. It is a somatic. It is a somatic one. Somatic means that is under your voluntary control. Effector organs may be either somatic, that is for example skeletal muscle. Somatic, that is skeletal muscle, which is under control of, it is under voluntary control. Somatic muscles. Then autonomic muscles, for example, cardiac muscles, you can control that. You can control your heartbeat. So what is normal? It is 72. So if you have depressed or if you have sad, so you cannot say that I am sad and my heartbeat is only 20 beats per hour. So you cannot change. You cannot change your heartbeat. So that is under involuntary control. That is not under your control. In cardiac muscle, there is smooth muscle of GIT. For example, you can stop your peristalsis. Glands, you cannot control your secretions. Again, this autonomic nervous system is under two types, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Are you getting or not? समझ रहे आपको? Okay. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system consists of different pairs of nerves. 31 pairs of spinal nerve. So out of that 31 pair of spinal nerve, you have 8 cervical nerves, thoracic nerves are 12, lumbar are 5, sacral are 5, and coccygeal is. Remember this, okay? Cervical spinal nerve 8, thoracic 12, lumbar 5, sacral 5, and coccygeal. Then 12 pairs of cranial nerve. Cranial nerve means that originate from cranium. Cranium is nothing but the skeletal structure that includes the brain. So जहाँ पे brain located है skull में, so that is nothing but the cranium. So those nerves arising from brain, that is known as a spinal, that is known as a cranial nerve. And these spinal nerves, they are originating from spinal cord. 12 pair of cranial nerves that originate from brain and autonomic nervous system, they are considered as a part of peripheral nerves. What is neuron? Neuron is a structural and functional unit of your nervous system. Neuron is a structural and functional unit of your nervous system. Like for example, you have different organs like your liver, your muscle, liver. Organ is nothing but it is a collection of cells for particular function. Initially, you have cell. So collection of cell for particular function is known as a organ. Collection of organ for a particular task is known as a system. Collection of cell for particular function is known as a tissue, and collection of tissue for a particular task is known as an organ, and collection of different organs for doing a one task known as a system. So this is nothing but the we have seen the first lecture, very first lecture. Now neuron is the structural and functional unit of your nervous system. So neuron have different parts like cell body, axon, and dendrites. So these three parts are there: cell body, axon, and dendrites. There are different parts of neuron. Okay, remember. Neurons are referred as a nerve cell. They can redivide and dependent on glucose for energy. So nerve cell depends only on glucose for energy, and there are few nerve cells which can redivide. Not each and every cell will not redivide. You have your neuron has different part like cell body, dendrites. Cell body are made up of gray matter, and axon and dendrites they make white matter. There are two matters in the nervous system, gray matter and white matter. So gray matter is nothing but the collection of cells, cell body. So whatever the neuron is there, so whatever neuron is there, so neurons cell body of neurons or collection of cell body of neurons that comprises gray matter, and a collection of your dendrites and axons that comprises white matter. Remember. Then axons of peripheral nerves, they are covered or wrapped up with the Schwann cell, and in between the layers there is a fatty substance called as a myelin, and that's why myelin sheath is covering over the neurons, covering over the axon part of your neuron. There are two types of neuron: myelinated neuron and demyelinated neuron. Myelinated neuron and unmyelinated neuron. So myelinated neuron will have this myelin sheath covering on their axons. Unmyelinated neuron will not have myelin sheath covering on their axon. So there is a different function of this myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is made up of different phospholipids like cerebrosides. They have seen the phospholipids, cerebrosides, gangliosides, and then that phospholipids. Okay. So myelin sheath is made up of phospholipids, and it is a covering over the axon part of your neurons. Okay, and that is important for the that will act as a shock absorber. That is also responsible for the fast conduction of nerves. That will also prevent the cross connection between two nerves. So they will act as a insulator, okay, covering. Remember, the Schwann cells are also there axon. Now, in case of unmyelinated neuron, Schwann cells are directly attached to a axon. But in case of myelinated neuron, Schwann cells are on a outer side. Schwann cells are present after the myelin sheath. Basic cell of your neurons or nervous system is known as a glial cell. Remember, glial cell, G-L-I-A-L, glial cell. Now, if these glial cells are present in the neuron, they are known as astrocytes. This was question in GPAT 21. So astrocytes are found in the one of the following tissue. There is an option like nervous tissue. So astrocytes are found in the nervous tissue. यहाँ पे लिखा नहीं मैं बोल रहा हूँ. Nerve impulse are generated by exchange in the resting membrane potential. For example, resting membrane potential nervous tissue normally that is a minus 60 millivolt, -60 millivolt. Sorry, minus 70 millivolt. There is a depolarization when there is sodium enter inside the cell. Okay, and repolarization when potassium will leave, or hyperpolarization when chloride will go. Remember, nerve impulse are generated by exchange of nerve impulse are generated by changes in the resting membrane potential using different extracellular cations or anions. बाद में इसको nerves which are involved in the senses like touch, temperature, sight, and hearing, they are known as sensory nerve. And nerve which are supplied to a muscle for contraction and relaxation, they are known as a motor nerve. याद रखो इसको. Somatic nerves, they are under your voluntary control. For example, nerves of skeletal muscle. So you can contact the skeletal muscle. You can do different action by using your hands and arms. That is under your control. So that is known as a somatic nerves. And autonomic nerves, which are not under your control, they are known as a autonomic nerve. For example, nerve supplied to a cardiac tissue, nerve supplied to a your smooth muscle of GIT, smooth muscle of kidney, different granular secretion you cannot control. That is the autonomic nervous system. Okay. Now it is a you can see over here is a structure of neuron. So it is a structure of neuron. Neurons are divided into three parts. First one is your cell body, then dendrites and axon. So this is known as a cell body. This yellow part is known as a cell body. Okay? Cell body. तो इसमें यहाँ पे न्यूक्लियस भी है. So cell body is like a nerve cell. So here you will have all the constituent like cell. So mitochondria, cytoplasm, etc., etc. Okay, but nucleus, mitochondria, cytoplasm. But there is one major difference between other cells and neuronal cells. So this nucleus will not have centromeres. Centromeres, or you can say centromeres means this nucleus will not have genetic material. So that's why nerve cell cannot redivide. ये redivide नहीं हो सकता, एक सेल से दो सेल नहीं बन सकता. Because this nucleus will not have centromeres or genetic material. It cannot be redivided. Now this is a structure of axon. This is structure which is known as cell body. These are nothing but the dendrites. These are nothing but the dendrites. You can see cell body, dendrites. Yes, okay. This is known as axonal hillock. Axonal hillock. This part is known as axon. This part is known as axon. This part is known as terminal buttons. Axon may be two type. Depending upon the covering of this axon, the neuron are two type. Either they are myelinated neuron or unmyelinated neuron. So you can see over here the covering of this myelin sheath over the neuronal fiber. So these they are known as neuronal fiber. Okay. So whatever these things are there, so dendrites, then dendrites, and then this axon and all terminal buttons, they are known as a neuronal fiber. Okay, so here is a covering over axon of neuron is nothing but the myelin sheath. There is a covering, okay, covering known as a myelin sheath. It is made up of phospholipids, sphingomyelins, and then cerebrocytes, all that. Okay, sphingomyelins, sphingosines are made up of phospholipids. So you can say here is a axon, here is a Schwann cell. You can see Schwann cell. So this myelin sheath is not continuous to all over the part of axon. Somewhere it is absent. So somewhere it is absent. So that the area where it is absent, known as a nodes of Ranvier. Nodes of Ranvier. So myelin sheath is not continuous and it is absent at some part of axon. Okay, so that part is known as a nodes of Ranvier. So this is nothing but the myelinated neuron, and the neuron in which myelin sheath is present, that is known as a myelinated neuron. And the neuron where myelin sheath is not present, they are known as a unmyelinated neuron. Unmyelinated. You can see here Schwann cells are little bit away from the axon part in case of myelinated neuron, and here in case of unmyelinated neuron, Schwann cells are near to axon. Okay. Now, because this nucleus of this nerve cell will not have centromeres, and that's why it cannot redivide like other normal cells. ये जो न्यूक्लियस है इसमें जेनेटिक मटेरियल या फिर सेंट्रोमर्स है वो नहीं होगा, that's why it will not divide and redivide. Okay. Now again, depending upon the cell body, neurons are classified into three types depending upon the cell body. ये आपको पढ़ाया नहीं होगा. Depending upon the location of cell body, they are classified into different ways. Unipolar neuron. So here cell body and these dendrites and in case of unipolar neuron, so dendrites will be dendrites of one neuron and dendrites of another neuron. In between that there will be cell body. That is known as a unipolar. You can see first. Second one is a bipolar. So here the cell body is in between these two. It's a bipolar, and that is a multipolar neuron. In case of multipolar neuron, the cell body, they are wrapped inside the dendrites. Cell body is wrapped inside the dendrites. That is known as a multipolar neuron. Then depending on the length of this axon also they are classified. Okay, depending upon the length of this axon, nerve cells are also classified: long nerve, short nerve. So particularly short nerves are present in the brain. Okay, so whatever brain part is there, there is a presence of short nerves. So this axon will be short over the nerve present in the brain, but this axon will be long in case of peripheral nerves. Axon will be long in case of peripheral nerve. And remember one thing, I have told about the gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is made up of a collection of these cell body. Collection of this cell body that will give you gray matter, and collection of these axons and dendrites. Axons and dendrites will give you white matter. And the white matter, the color of white matter is white because of this the because of this myelin sheath. Myelin sheath, ठीक है. ग्रे मैटर में क्या होगा आपका सेल बॉडीज होगा, व्हाइट मैटर में क्या होगा आपका डेंड्राइट्स एंड आपका एक्सॉन होगा. तो एक्सॉन में क्या होता है, एक्सॉन में होता है आपका माइलिन शीट. दैट्स व्हाई योर white matter will have white color due to the phospholipid present in the myelin sheath. Remember this. Now in the brain, white matter is present at centrally and gray matter is in the periphery. So white matter is enclosed in the gray matter in case of brain. Okay. Now in case of spinal cord, white matter is present at periphery and gray matter is present at central. So in the spinal cord, gray matter is enclosed by white matter. So there is a little bit difference. So there are different classes of neurons. They depending upon their anatomical, जैसे होता है, depending upon the cell presence of cell body, where it is located, depending on the location of cell body, depending upon the length of axon. So they are classified, but it is not required for you. It is beyond the scope of this lecture, and you are beyond the scope of your GPAT. Now neurons are nothing but the working horse of nervous system. They are the unit of nervous system, and they are supported by another tissue known as neuralgia. So neurons are the working horse of your nervous system. They are supported with the another tissue known as neuralgia. Gray matter is nothing but the cell body. Collection of cell body will give gray matter, and they are found in the periphery of brain and central part of spinal cord. They are found in the periphery of brain. Periphery of brain मतलब क्या? तो वहाँ पे peripheral part में क्या रहेगा? Gray matter रहेगा और central part में क्या रहेगा? White matter रहेगा. Okay? And central part of spinal cord. Central part of spinal cord मतलब क्या? यहाँ पे periphery में white matter रहेगा, central part में gray matter रहेगा. Okay? So white matter is nothing but the collection of axon and dendrites. Android group of cell body is called as nuclei. Group of cell body is called as nuclei in the CNS, known as ganglia in the peripheral nervous system. So group of cell bodies, if they are present in the brain, that is known as a nuclei. Group of cell bodies that is present in the peripheral nervous system, that is known as ganglia. Now parts of neuron cell body is there, then okay, cell body is there, then dendrites are there, then axon is there. Okay, so cell body containing nucleus, cell bodies are only found in the CNS or close proximity to CNS. Cell body is a maximum जो होता है cell body part जो होता है that is found in the CNS only or close proximity to it. And cell bodies are not found in the periphery, not present in the limbs. जैसे आपका पैर है, पैर का नर्व है, उसमें आपका सेल बॉडी नहीं रहेगा, उसमें सिर्फ आपका एक्सॉन रहेगा, डेंड्राइट्स रहेगा. So cell body is only present in the brain and or near to the brain, means in the spinal cord. So in periphery, cell body is not present because in these limbs, hand and legs, they are more prone to injuries. ठीक है, आप कहीं भी गिर जाओ, आपका हड्डी उठ जाएगा या फिर हाथ टूट जाएगा. So in that case, if cell body get damaged, cell body of neuron get damaged, it cannot be repaired. Sorry, it cannot be regenerated. It can be repaired partially, but it cannot be regenerated. Otherwise, if it is a regenerated or repaired, otherwise I will be okay. It cannot be regenerated. So I am like this. Cell body cannot be regenerated. Okay, and they are not present in the limbs because they are prone to injuries. And dendrites are an extension of cell body that transmit the impulse towards another cell body of axon transmit the impulse away from the cell body. Dendrites, cell body, and axon will carry. Now, in the peripheral nervous system, these three parts are wrapped in a specialized cell called as a Schwann cell. In embryonic development, nerve cell can grow around the neuron, encloses in a several layer of Schwann cell. These layers are called as a myelin sheath. They consist of phospholipids in nature, which act as an insulator and which also helps in the faster conduction of, particularly sphingomyelin and cerebrocytes are the phospholipid present in the myelin sheath. And there is a degeneration of myelin sheath over the neuron or nerve fiber. The condition is known as a multiple sclerosis. Yeah, so it is a disease or it is a condition, not a disorder. It is disorder of nervous system where there is a demyelination of neuron. That's why the patient is not able to coordinate. The patient is not able to cognition functions are affected and all that. Multiple sclerosis is the demyelination of neuron. Now the gap between two Schwann cells, now the gap between two Schwann cells or neuron, the tiny gap or small gap present between two neuron is known. Okay, the gap between two Schwann cell on a neuron is known as a nodes of Ranvier, or you can say the myelin layer is not present continuously on the neuron. So in somewhere it is not present. Now that gap is known as the nodes of Ranvier. Also known as neuropathway nodes. They they are the part of neuronal cell membrane which depolarize during nerve impulse. So in between the layer of your myelin sheath, whatever gap is present, so that gap is responsible for the generation and conduction of nerve impulse in a myelinated neuron. In demyelinated neuron, there is no such gap because there is no myelin sheath. The neurolemma, that is nuclei and cytoplasm of Schwann cell, are wrapped around the myelin sheath. Peripheral nerves can regenerate partly if they are damaged and if corrected by microsurgery. Schwann cells release chemical causes that causes regenerate nerve. Schwann cells, they will release chemical or not chemical particularly, they will release a peptide known as a nootropic peptide that have capacity to repair the nerves. Nerve can be repaired partly in a peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system, you cannot repair the nerves. You cannot रीजनरेट तो नहीं कर सकते लेकिन थोड़ा बहुत रिपेयर कर सकते हैं, वो भी सिर्फ पेरिफेरल नर्व्स में. पेरिफेरल नर्व्स कैन बी repaired if damaged, or they can be corrected by microsurgery partly, not fully. Okay, because Schwann cells present in the peripheral nerves, they secrete one peptides. They secrete the peptides which can which can correct or regenerate the nerve. These are nothing but the neutrophil. There are different. There are variety of peptides. That is beyond the scope of your lecture also. GPAT के लिए भी important नहीं है वो कौन से है, लेकिन आपको चाहिए तो मैं बोलूँगा. Now the synapse is nothing but the small gap between neurons and dendrites or cell body of another neuron. The gap, tiny gap or smaller gap present between small gap or tiny gap present between of axon of one neuron and dendrites of another neuron. That is known as a synapse. So what is synapse? Synapse is the smaller gap between two neurons. Now you can see here it is the axon of one neuron. Axon of one neuron. That is known as a presynaptic neuron. This is a dendrites of another neuron which is known as a postsynaptic neuron. ये जो वाला है इसको बोलेंगे presynaptic neuron. उसको बोलेंगे postsynaptic neuron. So it is a presynaptic neuron. It is a presynaptic. It is a postsynaptic neuron. So now in between these neurons there is a tiny gap. There is a tiny gap which is known as a synapse. Which is known as a synapse. Now whole pharmacology is based upon this. How there is a communication between these two neurons. So these two neurons will communicate each other by releasing the chemical transmitters. They are known as a neurotransmitters. By releasing the chemical transmitters, they are known as a neurotransmitter. So the communication between these two neurons is done by chemical transmitters or neurotransmitters. So there is again it can take one lecture to explain the synthesis release of neurotransmitter. Okay, but in a short I will explain you. So this is known as a presynaptic neuron, and this presynaptic neuron, in the presynaptic neuron there is a synthesis and storage of neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter जो है that is a synthesis and storage of neurotransmitter in the presynaptic neuron. Particularly they are stored in the vesicles known as a synaptic vesicles. Known as a synaptic vesicles. तो यहाँ पे ये store हो जाएंगे synthesis होके. They are synthesized locally and stored locally and they are released. Okay. So synthesis के लिए different. So for example, adrenaline, noradrenaline, pyrrolizine, dopamine. They are synthesized from phenylalanine amino acid. So by the different process like phenylalanine hydroxylase, tyrosine hydroxylase, dopa decarboxylase, then noradrenaline synthesis. These are I will explain it later on. Okay. So they are synthesized and stored in the vesicles. They are released by the process of exocytosis. They are released by the process of exocytosis. Whenever there is an impulse that will come to the neuron impulse will the synaptic vesicle के ऊपर भी क्या होता है, यहाँ पे भी ion channels होती है इसके. So whenever there will be impulse, so there is the entry of calcium ions inside the cell. There is a entry of calcium ions inside this synaptic vesicle, and that will rupture the vesicle, and there is a release of this neurotransmitter. Now released neurotransmitter will act on a receptor present in the postsynaptic neuron. यहाँ पे जो रिसेप्टर है जैसे ये रिसेप्टर होगा यहाँ पे उसके जाके वो एक्ट करेंगे. So these neurotransmitter will will act on a different receptor. Okay. Now this receptor may be either different type. It may be either G protein coupled, it may be ion channel. Mostly they are ion channel. So they will change the permeability for ions. Okay, and there will that's how there will be conduction of impulse. Now whatever neurotransmitter is released over here, that is utilized, that will act on this receptor. Part of neurotransmitter will act on this receptor. Part of neurotransmitter will be metabolized over here only. Neurotransmitter will be metabolized over here by their metabolizing enzyme, and some part of neurotransmitter will be again taken back by reuptake mechanism. So यहाँ पे जितना neurotransmitter release होगा उसमें से कुछ neurotransmitter act होगा उनके receptor के ऊपर, कुछ क्या होगा मेटाबोलाइज होगा लोकल मेटाबोलाइजिंग हार्मोन, कुछ क्या होगा रिटर्न बैक आ जाएगा वेसिकल्स में. तो रिटर्न बैक मैकेनिज्म इज दैट इज द रीअपटेक, different reuptake. So it is a typical example of your impulse transmission at a synapse, particularly in the cholinergic neurons. ये cholinergic neuron है, वहाँ पे acetylcholine का एक्सप्लेन किया है. याद रखो these are nothing but the vesicle. Here there is a synthesis and storage of neurotransmitter. physical content neurotransmitter. This is a receptor site. When there will be release of this neurotransmitter from synaptic vesicle by the process of exocytosis. This released neurotransmitter will act on these receptors, and then the signal will be transmitted to another neuron. So this how there is a, it is known as a neurohumoral transmission. Neurohumoral transmission. I'm not impulse or action potential. So it is a chemical neurotransmitter. There is a chemical neurotransmitter in the synaptic knob of presynaptic axon sensitized and stored in the vesicle released by exocytosis because of electrical impulse, which diffuses across the postsynaptic neuron and generate the electrical impulse by interacting with its receptor. Now, neuronal cell will have a minus 22 minus 110 millivolt electrical voltage inside the cell. Transmission of nerve impulse is due to movement of ions across the cell membrane. In the resting state of nerve is a polarized. In the resting state of nerve, the membrane of nerve is polarized due to difference in the concentration of ion across the extracellular and plasma. Difference in the concentration of ion or charge on both sides of the membrane. This is known as the resting membrane potential. The rest outside charge is positive and inside charge is negative. Sodium is known as the extracellular cation. Potassium is known as the intracellular cation. सोडियम बाहर रहता है सेल के बाहर, दैट्स व्हाई इट इज एक्स्ट्रा सेलुलर कैटायन. पोटेशियम जो है वो इनसाइड द सेल रहता है, दैट्स व्हाई इट इज इंट्रासेलुलर. एंट्री ऑफ मोर पॉजिटिव आयंस इनसाइड द सेल विल कॉज डीपोलराइजेशन. ठीक है, आपको इनसाइड द सेल नेगेटिव पोटेंशियल होता है, आउटसाइड द सेल पॉजिटिव पोटेंशियल होता है. जैसे ही बाहर से कोई पॉजिटिव पोटेंशियल वाला कैटायन अंदर आएगा तो अंदर का पोटेंशियल जो है, जो नेगेटिव है, वो क्या होगा, डिस्टर्ब हो जाएगा. दैट इज नोन एज डीपोलराइजेशन. दैट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द जनरेशन ऑफ इम्पल्स एंड कंडक्शन ऑफ इम्पल्स. डीपोलराइजेशन. ओके, नाउ रीपोलराइजेशन. जो डीपोलराइजेशन हुआ है वो वैसे नहीं रहता, वो रिपोलराइज होता है. सो इफ देयर इज अ डीपोलराइजेशन, द कैटायंस विल expelled out of the cell. That is known as repolation. Repolation is the process of normalizing or restoring the normal membrane potential. Now, refractory period is nothing but the time required to attain the resting membrane potential after depolarization. तो पहला depolarization हो गया, तो उसके बाद में repolarization होने के लिए कितना टाइम लगेगा, उसको बोलेंगे refractory period. And that is due to sodium potassium exchange form, excitation or excitatory synapse. Where neurotransmitter can cause neuron to depolarize as there is entry of sodium inside the cell and transmit impulse to another neuron. Inhibitory neurons, so where neurotransmitter of postsynaptic neuron get hyperpolarized due to entry of chloride ions. Sodium अंदर गया, so what happens? There are two kind of neuron, excitatory neuron and inhibitory neuron. So whenever there is a depolarization, there is a excitation or conduction of impulse. Whenever there is a hyperpolarization, there is inhibition or no generation of impulse. So what is hyperpolarization? I will explain. So suppose जैसे सोडियम अंदर जाता है, अंदर का पोटेंशियल नेगेटिव है, सोडियम अंदर जाएगा तो वहाँ पे पोटेंशियल डिस्टर्ब हो जाएगा, दैट इज नोन एज डीपोलराइजेशन. जैसे सोडियम पॉजिटिव होता है Na+, जैसे समझ लीजिए कि बाहर से क्लोराइड आयन अंदर जा रहा है. So what happens? Already there is a negative potential inside the cell, and from outside also negative ions are going, so it will cause hyperpolarization. So the negative potential will be increased, and that is known as a hyperpolarization. So there will be no generation of impulse after hyperpolarization, there will be no conduction of impulse after hyperpolarization. That is how depolarization and hyperpolarization. Now the neurons where there is entry of sodium, that is known as excitatory neurons or synapse, and where there is entry of chloride ion inside cell, that synapse is known as the inhibitory synapse. Inhibitory synapse. Now you can see diagram. So this is how action potential is generated. So inside the cell, the negative potential when resting membrane potential is around 70 millivolt, minus 70 millivolt. Even resting membrane potential of nerve, यहाँ पे जो red line है वहाँ पे 70. So minus 70 millivolt, that is a resting potential of nerve. Now when sodium will when there is impulse, when there is stimulus or stimulus or impulse, so there will be entry of sodium inside the cell. जहाँ पे जो -70 था वो सोडियम जैसे एंटर होगा वो माइनस कम होता जाएगा, -60 -40 तक जाएगा, तो -55 -50. that is known as a firing level, minus 55. So at that time, abrupt entry of sodium will be there. There is a depolarization. Okay, depolarization. Yes, some depolarization over. Yeah, and after that there will be a repolarization. After that there is repolarization in this curve. That is known as a after depolarization. There will be repolarization. So this is known as a firing level, and the time required to get a repolarization is known as a refractory period, RA. When suppose that when chloride will undergo, chloride will enter in the cell. तो पहले क्या हुआ, आपका सोडियम एंटर गया, अभी क्लोराइड अगर एंटर गया करेगा, क्लोराइड माइनस Cl माइनस, तो क्या होगा, सो ऑलरेडी जो नेगेटिव पोटेंशियल है -70 मिलीवोल्ट, सो when chloride will go inside the cell, so this negative potential will again increase in the negative side, so go increasing on negative side, so that is known as a hyperpolarization. You can see here red line, so that is known as a hyperpolarization. So depolarization will result in the action से एक्शन पोटेंशियल जनरेट हो जाएगा या फिर कंडक्शन हो जाएगा, लेकिन पोलराइजेशन जो है, पोलराइजेशन यहाँ पे कोई एक्शन पोटेंशियल जनरेट नहीं होगा, फिर नर्व कंडक्शन नहीं होगा. That's how nerve conduction and impulse generation starts. There are different neurotransmitters in the brain. Yes, for example, dopamine, noradrenaline, gamma aminobutyric acid, glutamate, glycine, serpin, STP, and capelin, etc. So these neurotransmitters may be either inhibitory or excitatory. For example, GABA is inhibitory in nature, noradrenaline is excitatory in nature, glutamate is excitatory. They are released by the process of exocytosis. They are synthesized locally in the neuron. They are stored in the synaptic vesicles, and they are released by the process of exocytosis. इसके ऊपर भी क्वेश्चन आ चुका है. Transmitters are released by exocytosis. After release, they will interact with the receptor on postsynaptic neuron, and some part of that neurotransmitter will be metabolized or will be inactivated by metabolizing enzyme, and some part will be taken back into the presynaptic neuron. That is known as the reuptake process to terminate the action of neurotransmitter. Complexity of synapse and various neurotransmitters are targets for the various kind of drugs like CNS stimulant, depressant, antipsychotics, mood elevators, adrenergic, and cholinergic. Okay, you can see over here again. So this is a demyelinated neuron. So in case of demyelinated neuron, the entry of sodium inside the cell, development of action potential. When there is entry of sodium cell, the action potential will be developed, or nerve impulse will be generated, or it is conducted. And in case of myelin sheath, so whatever nodes are present, okay. So now in case of demyelinated neuron, the nerve flows smoothly. यहाँ पे nerve impulse जो है वो smooth flow करेगा. In case of demyelinated neuron, ये जो है it is a demyelinated neuron. So nerve impulse will flow smoothly right from this place. Okay, it will flow smoothly. There is no myelin sheath over this. Okay? Known as demyelinated neuron. The entry of sodium will cause depolarization, and there will be generation or conduction of impulse smoothly. Now, what happens in case of demyelinated neuron? So this is demyelinated neuron. So they are covered by myelin sheath. They are covered by myelin sheath. Where it is absent, the myelin sheath absent at certain points. They are known as a nodes of Ranvier. Here nodes of Ranvier. Here be nodes of Ranvier. At these nodes, sodium will enter inside the cell. Node, sodium will enter inside the cell and will cause depolarization. And then nerve impulse will be generated. ये देखो सोडियम इंटर हो गया. तो एक पल्सटाइल नर्व इम्पल्स ट्रांसफर होगा पल्स में, मतलब यहाँ से यहाँ तक हो जाएगा. आपका पहले देखो यहाँ से यहाँ तक होगा, फिर यहाँ से यहाँ तक जाएगा. सो पल्सेस में यहाँ पे ट्रांसमिशन होगा. सो नर्व इम्पल्स इज ट्रांसमिटेड smoothly in case of demyelinated neuron, and it is transmitted by pulse flow in the myelinated neuron. Remember, actually it is not required for your GPAT, but still knowledgeably important. And spinal cord are completely surrounded by 3 layers of tissue. So brain and spinal cord is covered by 3 layers of tissue known as meninges. Okay. So outer membrane is nothing but the dura mater, middle membrane is nothing but the arachnoid matter, and inner membrane is known, or inner covering is known as a pia mater. And the space between arachnoid matter and pia mater is known as a subarachnoid space, where there is a presence of spinal fluid. That is known as cerebrospinal fluid or CSF. यहाँ पे देखो ब्रेन एंड आपका जो स्पाइनल कॉर्ड है वो कवर किया जाता है डिफरेंट टिश्यू से. सो Okay. There are three layers of tissue covering over the brain. They are known as the meninges: outer dura mater, middle subarachnoid matter, and inner pia mater. The space between arachnoid matter and pia mater is known as a subarachnoid space. Is known as a subarachnoid space. Subarachnoid space. And in this space, there is a cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. This acts as a shock absorber. Then it will also remove the metabolic waste from brain and spine. It will act as shock absorber. It will also act as a nourishment to the brain and spinal cord. So there is a different function of CSF. That is a you can read from book. There are four ventricles in the brain: right ventricle, left ventricle, right and left lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and fourth ventricle. There are four ventricles in the brain. Okay. So these ventricles, uh, they are the formation of cerebrospinal fluid. So brain में कहाँ पे बनता है CSF? Ventricles में बनता है. Which consists of cerebrospinal fluid? CSF is secreted about 0.5 ml per minute. 0.5 ml CSF is secreted. So that is nothing but 72 ml per day. So 720 ml per day secret होता है आपका CSF. But only 120 ml fairly remains constant. So if you try to withdraw the, if you try to the, if you try to check the level of CSF in the body, so that is around 120 ml, which is a fair constant. It can be withdrawn using lumbar puncture needle technique. तो आपके स्पाइनल कॉर्ड में एक lumbar needle जो होता है वो बड़ा सा needle होता है. So by using lumbar puncture, you can withdraw CSF for clinical examination. For example, in case of meningitis, encephalitis and all that. अगर ब्रेन में कोई इन्फेक्शन हो गया आपको, बैक्टीरिया का इन्फेक्शन, so bacterial infection to these coverings of brain, they are known as meningitis. Bacterial infection or inflammation to this meninges, they are known as meningitis. Infection of brain with the virus, that is known as encephalitis. So CSF can be withdrawn from the spinal cord by puncturing the spinal cord with the help of lumbar puncture needle and insert into subarachnoid space below the fourth lumbar vertebra. You can withdraw the CSF for clinical examination. What is the composition of CSF? So cerebrospinal fluid will have water as a major, then mineral salts, glucose, plasma protein, leukocytes, creatinine, and urea. And CSF will act as a product. It will act. It is a protective function. Shock. It will act as a shock absorber.